How do you say no to temptation? Every day, all of us face temptation, that pull to do something that God says isn't right. And so many people in the church face a specific kind of temptation, the temptation to sin sexually. Some say up to 1 in 2 Christian men and 1 in 5 Christian women battle pornography on a monthly basis or more. And they want to reject it. And so they pray and they make promises to God, but then they fall and they fail. And sometimes they give up hope. But what if there's a factor that God has in His Word that's more powerful than all of our prayers and promises combined? I think what the Apostle Paul wrote in Titus chapter 2. He said, "It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age." But do you know what the "it" is? Just a verse before, the Apostle Paul doesn't talk about the consequences of sin or the threats of God's judgment. He says the grace of God has appeared. It teaches us to say no to ungodliness. You see, God's love for us, His grace, is what changes the human heart so that we're inspired to say no to sin. I think about the story I heard a few years ago of a woman who was in a terrible marriage. She fought with her husband, there were angry words, and the husband was so angry because he said that she never changed. He kept coming back to the same issues month after month and fight after fight, until one day he was so angry, he stormed into her room in the middle of the fight and he had a piece of paper. And he started writing things down and he said, "Since you can't remember what you need to change, I made you a list." Oh, the woman was so furious, she grabbed the paper, crumpled it up, and threw it in the back of the drawer and slammed it. And unfortunately, things only got worse. He separated, he moved out, he started an affair, and he divorced the woman. Well, a few years later, the woman met another man. And he wasn't perfect, but he understood grace. And when she raised her voice, instead of yelling back, he took some time and he prayed and tried to love her just like Jesus loved him. Well, one day that new husband was away for the weekend on business. And the woman was cleaning up the house and going through old drawers, and she opened the top drawer of her dresser, and way in the back she saw this crumpled up piece of paper. And she sat on the edge of the bed as all the emotions came flooding back, and she uncrumpled it. She found 5 things that she was doing for her husband. 5 things that all the threats and condemnation of her last marriage didn't inspire her to do, but that grace, freely given love, did. So if you're struggling with temptation, prayer is important, and it's good to be aware of the consequences, but more than anything, I don't want you to forget this, that grace appeared, and it teaches us to say no to sin. All of us struggle with temptation, so don't forget to share this video. If you have a story of God's grace, feel free to comment below and click subscribe. Tomorrow we're going to talk about God's best example of grace that teaches us to love Him with our heart, soul, mind, and strength.
I know something about you. There is someone who thinks that you are wonderfully and fearfully made. And this is not just some random guy on the internet that thinks this. It is the one